Hi, Rich.
Hi, Tony.
How
Happy
you doing?
Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. This is so fun that we're spending Valentine's Day morning together.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. Given you've basically been the person I've been with more than any other human in my life, it seems quite fitting.
true. But my apologies to your spouse.
And my apologies to your spouse as well and your entire family.
Yeah.
Um, All right, so let's just get to it. What I wanted to do with these series of Tony's takes is really go through our bargaining platform, kind of go back to the very beginning. These are the things we wanted to accomplish. We had 12 items on that platform, so I'm interviewing one person about a few items each, to allow everyone to kind of get to know the negotiating team and given that you're the chief negotiator, I really the two that I'm hitting you with out of the three are kind of big ticket items. So I'm going to share the screen for a minute just so I could show um, our faculty the kinds of questions I'm asking. So I'm going to go over with Rich 1, 3, and 12. So one is the tenure protection, and three, so one and three sort of relate to each other, the force majeure and the retrenchment. And then 12, I wanted to talk a little bit about um, us not being able to get the retiree dependent healthcare benefits back. And then what I'd like to ask of all of the negotiators is, why you're recommending a yes vote, and then to take your hat off as chief negotiator. And as a faculty member, tell me if you think this contract's good, and then maybe just talk a little bit overall impressions. Obviously, it's no secret that we had a very tumultuous relationship, a difficult relationship with the administration since last summer with the RIF list. And, how you feel like these negotiations reflected that or helped that, or it's still status quo, or what you think. So I'm going to take this off the screen share so we could look at each other, and we'll just get started. So number one, tenure protection. Force majeure needs to be removed from the contract to improve job security for all faculty and protect tenure. So can you tell us what we did in order to remove that or not remove that? Go ahead.
Sure. So that pertains to a section of Article 15. And a lot of people became familiar with that because of the RIF actions of the summer, including all of us on the negotiating team. So it's true that the words force majeure are not in our tentative agreement, but we're not trying to pull anything over on anybody. The the circumstances under which the university could enact force majeure, catastrophic circumstances, are still a provision of the tentative agreement. We did succeed in curtailing that a bit, in that there's a limit, so that once catastrophic circumstances are established and actions are taken as a result of those catastrophic circumstances, those actions are no longer justified after the catastrophic circumstances end. So it's not that catastrophic circumstances are declared and then anything the administration wants after that can happen. As soon as the catastrophe is overcome, then the provisions of the normal contract go back into effect.
When you say
So,
overcome, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, so that is meant to deal with an emergency. Once the emergency is over, then we go back to the protections that are in the contract, including Article 15 and all the other articles.
So how would we know? Okay, let's use the pandemic, right? Obviously this article that we are all super familiar with was not an article on anyone's radar. Like, I feel like when I started working here, this just wasn't on my radar at all. But I'm wondering now, since we're living through this catastrophic event, how would you know the pandemic, if you will, is over? Or is it like the university's response? Like, how do you know the event, so to speak, is over?
So it's not necessarily the event, even though that's what I said, but the effects of the event on the university. So the university argued last March that they were going to have such a drastic reduction in their revenues that they had to take action and take action quickly in order to deal with that. Part of the problem, and this gets to addressing the other parts of faculty protections that you're going to ask me about, is the university argued that the provisions in Article 15, which hadn't really been modified since our very first contract, were so restrictive that the university could not be nimble in how they responded to this crisis. They didn't have enough time under the provisions in that contract, and they didn't have enough flexibility under the provisions in that contract in order to deal with the crisis. And therefore, they were forced to enact force majeure. And then, and under force majeure, faculty didn't have the protections that were in Article 15. So our goal as a negotiating team was not to make Article 15 never be able to be enacted. It sounds counterintuitive, but we want the university to be able to use that article if they do need a reduction in force in the future due to some crisis, so that the faculty get the protections that are in that article, which is you get notice. There is accountability for how long you have served the university and what your rank is. There's due process. We want all of those protections for faculty, and we want the university to be able to use that article in a reasonable way so faculty get all those protections. So if we had pushed to the point where you cannot use this article, and we're removing the idea that you can use it under catastrophic circumstances, even under those conditions, the university can use another article in the contract called Article 33, where they can renegotiate what has been negotiated under exigent circumstances. So we were really in a position where we want to preserve protections under an emergency for faculty. And so we needed to be more flexible for the university, for the administration, so that they can use it under those emergency circumstances. And they can't make the argument that this is so onerous, takes so long, and is so hard to use that we have no choice but to invoke catastrophic circumstances.
Okay, so what Rich is talking about now is number 3. We've kind of dovetailed into it: stronger faculty protections against retrenchment. And this reads, we will bargain clearer language around the order of release of all faculty, tenure track and non-tenure track, with rank and tenure taken into consideration. Additionally, all non-bargaining unit faculty should be released before any bargaining unit faculty in retrenchment, and the financial circumstances triggering retrenchment must be clearly defined. So if I hear you right, and obviously I was on the negotiating team, the way I sort of think about it, and correct me if I'm kind of thinking about this wrong, there's sections 1 through 11, and then there's section 12, right? So section 12 is that force majeure. Sections 1 through 11 is more about retrenchment. And I felt like we were on this teeter-totter. If we were going to get rid of 12, sections 1 through 11, which is the protection of tenure, and taking all of these kind of personal circumstances into account, and even our personal qualifications into account, time served, tenure, whether I'm associate professor, whether I'm associate NTT, blah, 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 blah. We either had to strengthen 1 through 11 and keep 12, or they were going to decimate 1 through 11 while we got rid of 12. Is that sort of accurate?
Yeah, so the counter proposals from the university we were looking at were really dire. And they were not in name removing tenure, but in practice removing the protections of tenure. And that is something we just could not let happen. And so we did address other problems in Article 15, as was pointed out to us by our non-tenure track colleagues. So the way the order of release was in the current bargaining agreement, you could have a situation, this is an extreme situation, but you could have a situation where you have an assistant professor hired just this semester, and they would be released after a non-tenure track faculty who had been here for 25 years. And it didn't make sense to us and didn't seem fair to us that sort of disparity existed. And also the university said this is untenable for them, and part of what they were pointing to in the existing Article 15, in that they can't run the university without non-tenure track faculty, and they don't want to, and neither do we. And if they are saying that the only way to enact retrenchment is first get rid of all non-tenure track faculty before tenure track faculty, that was just a non-starter. They can't do that.
Yeah.
And so we accounted for that in this tentative agreement, in that there is recognition that non-tenure track faculty of rank have rank, and that rank should be considered in the order of retrenchment.
Yeah. I think before we got into this, and I don't know about you, but I thought force majeure was like clearly the thing that we wanted to get rid of. I didn't even think about until I got kind of really in touch with the contract how difficult it would be to enact retrenchment, and if in fact financial exigency existed and this catastrophic circumstance existed, they and I don't want to make it seem like I've drank the Kool-Aid as well, but if in fact things are dire enough and there is this circumstance with which something has to be done to reduce our force, I don't think retrenchment was super tenable to enact. I almost feel like it wasn't possible to do retrenchment. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is certainly something I've thought about, in that um, during this process, and I'll come back to this theme, I think we've come to understand much better the real and legitimate concerns of the administration for our future, near term and far term. And I also think through this process, they've come to see what our real legitimate concerns are for the university's future from a faculty point of view. In doing so, that has caused both of us to move from our firmly held positions about what the other side thinks. And so, yeah, you can call that drinking the Kool-Aid, and you can, and it's also not fair for us who spent over 400 hours getting to this point to expect that faculty are going to get to this point in a 20-minute Tony's tape. But I would ask faculty to allow for the possibility that that could be true. That if you understood more about the other side's perspective and they understood more about your perspective, that where we are now could look different than where we started.
That's good. That's good. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. So, all right, let me before we shift gears, 1 and 3, tenure protection, getting force majeure out. In some ways, that was a loss for us because we technically didn't get it out, right? So a concession, that was a concession on our part, although I would say it strongly is because number 3, clear language around the order of release, on and so forth, that was a very clear win for us. I mean, we essentially rewrote Article 15 other than Section 12, even though with Section 12, we did put an actual cap on it. Like you said, there's an end to force majeure. It's not just this open-ended, kind of provision anymore. Would you agree?
Yes, and I think it's unrealistic to think that the university would negotiate and agree to an agreement, a contract, that does not allow them any exit valve under catastrophic circumstances. I think those provisions are in contracts for a reason, and it's not just in our contract. And truthfully, at the table, as you remember, when we made a move on that, things really started to move. I think that is something that the university could not give up on. And frankly, we didn't have the sort of support that we were going to strike uh, over that issue. And so I think that the agreement that we ended up with on Article 15 has better protections for our faculty in a reasonable environment where the university can still act under catastrophic circumstances. And let me say, I don't think that they want to. I don't think that I very strongly think that they do not want to enact catastrophic circumstances. And we're not just waiting for this contract to be ratified and therefore more faculty be let go. They know that what that costs them in terms of bad press, that is not good for the university going forward. They have no desire to do that in the near term. But they don't know what the future is going to be any more than we do. And so signing a contract where they cannot, under any circumstances, release faculty is just not realistic.
Yeah, I concur. I completely agree with you, which I'm not sure. I think what you said was really poignant. We've had this 400 plus hours thinking about this, processing this, arguing with each other on what really should we be doing, shouldn't we be doing? Is catastrophic events something that we need to fight for completely? And if we did, if that was a non-starter for us, would we have the support to strike? And I think we had a clear indication that we did not have support for a strike. And I really feel as though sections 1 through 11 are so much better that I don't think the university would be as quick to go to force majeure. Not that they were quick to go to force majeure, but I think they have a realistic option now, looking at the way retrenchment reads.
Yeah, and that realistic option is something that we know about. So if the university does, and I do not think they have any intention of doing this, but if they do go ahead and say, we are under catastrophic circumstances, we are going to fight them on that. And we're going to say, really? Are you saying that this new modified Article 15 can't be used, that we
Yeah.
can't have the protections under this article? You know that we're going to be all over that if that happens. And
Yeah.
again, I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. And obviously we're going to go long, but you are the chief negotiator. So, we tend
So
to
I
go
talk
long
a
in
lot.
our, yeah, well, you have a lot, you've thought about this more than any of us, and we've thought about this a lot. But I imagine you've lost sleep over this platform and what we're able to get and what we have to concede on. So speaking of something we had to concede on, the Retiree Dependent Healthcare Benefits. So I think we've explained this to people. If you want to give a very short rundown of what this was and the fact that we no longer have it.
Sure. So this is a benefit that was promised to retirees if they were hired before
It
a
was
certain
92.
date,
I think it was 92.
1992. Right. If you were hired after that date, you did not get this benefit. There are a few faculty that would still have this benefit, and there are current retirees that were enjoying this benefit, and that is health benefits for their spouse and their dependents. Also, life insurance that is provided for those particular hirees. It is a heartbreak to think that the university promised these people this benefit and now they're taking it away. For some of these people, they're very recently retired and were counting on this benefit in their retirement when they're calculating how much money am I going to have in retirement. And now they have to add a significant amount to that. The facts are that there is a financial metric that is tracked by outside agencies looking at the university that is greatly affected by this benefit. And by eliminating this benefit, the university increases their standing on that financial benefit, which was of great concern to them, to not alert external financial auditing agencies that we were falling behind on this one financial metric. It makes a big difference in the university's liability. And in terms of what benefits are typically offered, we are the last group at the university to enjoy this benefit. And it was even an issue before these negotiations that we knew that the university wanted to eliminate this benefit because of this outstanding liability and because we were last on the list. So we warned our current retirees that this was likely to happen. In fact, it did happen before we even got to this point. The university made this decision by the Board of Trustees action in January. We are sorry that we cannot continue this benefit, but we just didn't have a position where we could defend it. And we knew that our members were not going to strike over defending this benefit. It was the very last thing we let go of on the very last day of negotiations.
Yeah, this was a painful one. I think we all felt very committed to fighting for this because I'm sure you know, and I know multiple people who were receiving this benefit, people that have given their entire life to the university, people who were hired at probably a very non-competitive salary because of this benefit. Like that was the perk of taking a non-competitive salary, was you have this benefit for life. And I think one of the difficult things about these negotiations was recognizing we just couldn't get everything. And this was not something that I felt like this was a non-starter with the university. I felt like they had made this clear, not only by their action to terminate it, but I felt like from day one, they had made clear we cannot sustain this financially. And I think this was one that all of us had a hard time letting go of.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I apologize to the retirees that we could not sustain this benefit.
So, okay. I assume, I know that you are voting yes for ratification and that you are recommending to colleagues that you will vote yes and that they should vote yes on recommendation. I'm wondering though, or ratification, sorry. I'm wondering though, if you took your hat off as the chief negotiator and you went back to a scholar, a biologist who has been a full professor here for a number of years, do you think this contract is good for us?
Yeah, it's hard for me to separate that. I do think it's a good contract for us, but that's because of what I know. And what I know is a result of being chief negotiator. So if I did not know this, I hope that I would have an open mind and listen to the people who had spent the time putting this time in. Over the course of these negotiations, as I said before, I do think that both sides have changed their outlook. So I don't want to minimize at all the pain of what happened to the RIF faculty, and the pain they did go through and are going through now. I'm not going to say that it was okay. I'm not going to say that I agree with any of that. As chief negotiator, I saw myself and my role as, okay, what do we do now? I mean, how do we do our jobs? How do we go forward? I'm not saying let's put that in the past. I'm saying literally, how do we perform our jobs now? How do we get to a spot where we can come to work, look at each other in the eye virtually, and work together to try for our students to give them the best education possible, because that's really what it's all about. How do we do that? I do think that this agreement is a compromise for both sides, a compromise for the administration and a compromise for faculty in a way that we can live with that, in a way that we can go forward, and for a period of stability that we can get a little bit of breathing room and stop yelling at each other for a period of time. Um, I know that there's a lot of trust issues, um, but in order to overcome those trust issues, somebody's got to trust. And I do think that both sides have done that in these negotiations. I think we started entrenched in our positions, saying, you know, you're wrong and you're wrong. I think where we are now is recognizing, all right, I now see what you're worried about. And I think they would say the same thing. I now see what you're worried about. And I promise to consider your legitimate and deeply felt concerns going forward. I think both sides can say that. I think that's a good place to start building the university up again, building our enrollment up again, and building the health of this university up again so that we can do the best possible job for our students. I know that sounds like a political speech, but I really think that. I
I
really
agree.
that we need to do the best we can for our students. And I really think the best way to do that is to work with the administration going forward to make this the best university we can. They did listen to us. They did listen to us. It happened more toward the end of the negotiations than in the beginning of the negotiations. And I trust that they will listen to us going forward. I don't think they listen to us just to get a deal. I think that they will listen to us going forward.
So your overall impressions of the negotiation process, it almost seems like the first half and the second half are probably a little bit different.
Yeah, I think fair to say that I moved in my mindset. Um, I think the team moved in their mindset, and I think we moved the administration in their mindset. Um, and and they and both moved toward this agreement, and both sides are not completely happy with everything that's in the agreement. I think that's probably the sign of a good agreement, and so I think it's a good agreement.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm gonna ask you an off the cuff question. 6 years from now, you're gonna be the chief negotiator again?
No, I
What,
told
you
the
don't want to think about it?
no, I have thought about it. In fact, I thought about it before I agreed to do it. So I told the leadership when they cornered me, uh, and I said, I will do this until May of 2021, and then I will return to my lab. And so I am done being chief negotiator. I suggest that anybody on the negotiating team, wink, wink, would be an excellent replacement.
Oh, you talk about having to apologize to my wife. I think I would absolutely be getting divorced if I took that on definitively.
Well, you know, I said that when they cornered me. I said, I'm not sure I can make it through this and still be married. And that all credit is to my wife.
Yes. I think I could speak as a faculty member without being a negotiator, to say that you have been the absolute best chief negotiator that we could have had. And I've said this about you now countless times. The conscientiousness and care and just absolute devotion you've had to protecting the faculty and getting the best contract that we could for this time period has been unparalleled.
Well,
So as a faculty member, let me thank you. I know you are gonna make a self-deprecating comment right now. You're gonna say, well, I'm only as good as my team, or whatever it is that you're gonna say, but Rich Londraville, you will go down as one of the heroes of UA, at least in my book.
it's very nice of you to say. You know, I think all the chief negotiators in our past have done an incredible job. And I now appreciate how difficult it is. And I also, I'm not denigrating any other team, but I do think we had the best team ever, in that everybody on this team really threw everything they could into it. I got course release, but none of you did, and you all put in the same hours I did.
That's
And
not true, people. That is not true.
well, you set aside things that are important in your career, your
We
research,
did.
uh, and your personal lives, and you did it because you love this place and you want to keep working at this place and you want the place to be a good place. And not only that, but we needed certain things on this team through negotiations. We needed people who could really tear apart the budget. We needed people who could really get into the weeds on the language. We needed people who had an NTT perspective, which most of us do not have. And we had all those Justice League sort of perfect team people on this team. And it truly was collaborative. There were no divas on the team and nobody you had to watch out for. And also everybody felt safe to call out anybody else's crap and say, no, I think you're wrong. And it was okay. And that was an incredible intellectual experience. And I was happy to be part of it.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think this team has now spoiled me for the rest of my career because I think we did. It was really interesting to have a safe enough environment to, we spent evenings together, hours upon hours, and as we got into it, there was
Weekends.
just no room for niceties. If I didn't agree with, it was just, and there were times that we just had to give up our own argument to each other, that we just had to be like, you know what, that makes more sense. You're right. Or to say, I'm going to have to agree to disagree with you and let this go. It was incredible.
And University of Akron is full of faculty like this. Smart people trying hard for their students, for their colleagues, and they're dedicated to this place. It's a really good place, and it's a great place to get an education. And it really cemented that idea, which I already had going in, but it made, just another uh, brick in that wall of this is a really good place and it's worth fighting for. So thanks for your help, Toni. I
You're
appreciate
more
it.
than welcome. I'm going to quote you now to end this. You said I think at our first interview, you just want to go back to doing your thing, and
Yeah.
that we all just want to be able to do our thing. And I've heard people actually quote that eloquent line that you gave us. But I think I think all of us, all the way around, from NTT to faculty to staff to administrators, all of us now want to collectively just go back, grow the university, make it the healthiest it could be, so we could just do our thing.
Yeah. We're good. Patting ourselves on our back. We're good at what we do. I think this agreement allows us to do what we do and allows us to be excellent, and we will be. So let's get it ratified.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Toni.
Okay, bye.